Alright, let me start by saying this whole situation is so messed up that if I didn't live through it, I wouldn't believe it either. But here we are. My name's Mark Turner, I'm 32 years old, and I work as a software developer for a pretty successful tech firm. My life has always been fairly quiet, but that all changed when I found out how far my mother would go to keep up with appearances. Now, here's the thing you need to understand about my family. Mom is all about status. She's the kind of person who would spend a year's worth of savings just to impress people at a party. But she's not the only one. My sister, Carly, is the same way. She's 27, and I swear to God, if I had a dime for every time she posted an Instagram photo with a new designer bag or said something like, "I can't believe we don't have a private jet," I'd probably be retired by now. Carly works as a boutique manager, but you'd never know it from the way she acts like she's the queen of the world. You might be wondering, where's your dad in all this? He's been out of the picture 4 years, divorced when I was 16, and since then, he's been living somewhere far away in Florida, doing whatever retired people do. We don't really talk much. So, the story starts about a year ago when my mom suddenly announces she's going to throw the wedding of the century for Carly. Big surprise, right? Carly and her fiancé, Jason, had only been together for 6 months, but mom was Allin. The wedding was going to be a fairy tale. I thought it was strange considering Carly was still in the middle of a fun phase with men. She had barely gotten over some rich guy who had dumped her 2 weeks before she met Jason. But hey, what do I know about weddings? Mom didn't hesitate for a second when she told me she'd need help with funding the whole thing. It's going to be a grand event, Mark. The best of the best, she said. I was already rolling my eyes at the idea of spending a fortune on some day that would barely last a few hours. But that's Mom, right? Over the top, lavish, and constantly trying to make sure people think she's living the dream. Now, here's the kicker. When my mom asked me for financial help, she didn't mention that she had already blown through my inheritance. Yeah, you heard that right. The inheritance I was supposed to get from my father when he died. She didn't say a word about it, but when I asked her if she'd touched the funds, she gently informed me that she had used it all for Carly's wedding. Let me tell you, that hit me like a ton of bricks. At first, I thought it was some kind of sick joke. I mean, Mom was always a little irresponsible with money, but this? She drained my father's entire life savings for a wedding. A wedding for a girl who had no idea what she was doing with her life, who thought commitment was just a casual concept. And the worst part? Mom never even considered asking me for my opinion. I'm sitting here trying to save up for my own future, my own home, and she just went ahead and emptied what was rightfully mine. I felt sick to my stomach. When I confronted her about it, she just shrugged. It's for Carly's happiness, Mark. You know how much this means to her, she said, her voice filled with that tone that always seemed to work on people. Don't worry about the money. She deserves it. Yeah, right. Carly deserves everything, doesn't she? She's been getting away with selfish behavior since she was a kid. But this was the line. So, after months of stewing over it, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I wasn't going to let Mom screw me over like that. Not anymore. If she was going to blow everything I was meant to inherit, I was going to freeze the rest of the funds, my father's money, my money. I couldn't let her get away with it. I needed to get control back. But here's the crazy part, nobody in the family was talking about it. Carly was busy with wedding plans, Mom was acting like everything was fine, and I just sat there, watching the train wreck unfold. But soon, things would start changing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I'd been quiet 4 months, silently plotting my next move. But the more I saw my mom and Carly acting like nothing had happened, the more furious I got. The audacity. It wasn't just that she'd blown my inheritance on a wedding, it was the fact that she'd never even acknowledged what she did. No apology, no understanding of the gravity of her actions. She just kept acting like everything was normal. It all came to a head when I got a phone call from Carly. It was the night before the wedding, and I could tell by the frantic tone in her voice that she was in full-on bridezilla mode. I could hear the stress in her breath, like she was about to lose it completely. But, of course, she wasn't calling to check on how I was doing or to apologize for any of the past months. No, she had something much more important to discuss. Mark, she said, her voice tight, I need you to be at the wedding early. I want you to make sure everything goes according to plan. Mom's been a wreck, and I'm really counting on you to keep things together tomorrow. I couldn't help but chuckle darkly. Keep things together? After everything that had gone down, after she'd spent more money than I could ever hope to earn in a decade on a wedding to a man she'd barely known for 6 months, she had the nerve to ask for help. I was furious, but I knew I had to keep my cool. "I'll be there, Carly," I said, my tone neutral. "But you might want to talk to Mom about what happened to the inheritance. She hasn't exactly been transparent with me." The silence on the other end was deafening. For a moment, I thought I had lost the call, but then she spoke, and her voice was softer now, almost defensive. "I don't know what you want me to say, Mark. Mom did what she thought was best. It's just money. It doesn't matter in the long run, right? Money doesn't matter?" Did she really just say that? I had spent my whole life saving, planning, trying to build something for myself. And now she was telling me it didn't matter? I felt like I was going to lose my mind, but I bit my tongue. It was already too late to change anything. The wedding was happening tomorrow, and I was going to have to sit there and pretend to be supportive while I watched my mother and sister throw away everything I had worked for. The next day, I showed up at the wedding venue. The place was jaw-dropping, massive chandeliers, floral arrangements that could feed a small nation, and a guest list that looked like a who's who of people I couldn't care less about. People were laughing, clinking glasses, chatting about that amazing food and how beautiful the bride was going to look. But all I could think about was the $250,000 my mother had drained from my inheritance to make this day happen. The numbers haunted me. Every penny that was spent felt like a slap in the face. I found myself sitting in a corner, quietly observing the chaos. Carly was surrounded by her bridesmaids, all of them acting like they were part of the royalty. I had to hand it to her. She looked beautiful, in a way that almost made me forget everything else. Almost. But then, my eyes landed on my mom, who was practically glowing. She was fluttering around, making sure everything was perfect, pretending as if the last few months of my life hadn't just gone up in flames. It was all a show. A perfect, flawless show for everyone to watch. And then, there he was. Jason, the man Carly had chosen to marry. He was in his early 30s, tall, handsome in an unremarkable way, with a charm that screamed, "I'm here for the money." He shook my hand when I approached him, but I could see right through his smile. He knew what this wedding meant. He wasn't interested in Carly for her personality. No, Jason was interested in one thing: status. And I could already see he had his eye on the future. As I watched the scene unfold, something inside me snapped. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't pretend that everything was okay, that my mom wasn't destroying everything just to make Carly happy. That's when I decided it was time to put my plan into action. I knew I couldn't just freeze my mother's accounts right there and then, in the middle of the wedding. It wasn't the time, and honestly, I wasn't sure I was ready for the fallout that would come from it. But I had already gathered enough evidence to show that my mom had been living beyond her means. She had taken the inheritance, used it like it was her personal piggy bank, and now I had to make sure it didn't go any further. I couldn't let this wedding be the final blow, but I also knew that the moment the wedding was over, my next move would be the one that changed everything. The ceremony itself was beautiful, sure, everything had that perfect Instagram glow. Carly looked stunning, Jason looked proud to be there, and Mom, well, she was in her element, basking in the applause of everyone who had no clue about the nightmare going on underneath. But as the vows were exchanged, I couldn't shake the thoughts racing through my head. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Carly was the one who had everything handed to her on a silver platter. And what had I gotten? A mother who had emptied my inheritance and used it to throw an extravagant wedding that had nothing to do with love. This was about status. It was about showing everyone that Carly's life was perfect, even if it meant stepping on the one person who had tried to support her for years. And that was when I made my decision. The money was mine, and I was going to get it back. I couldn't keep the rage down. I didn't let anyone see it, but inside, my heart was pounding. I spent the rest of the night talking to a few of the guests, trying to keep my composure, but all I could think about was the bank account, the money my mom had taken, the money I was going to get back at any cost. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Toasts, speeches, everyone celebrating. But all I could focus on was the aftermath. What would happen once I froze the funds? Would Mom finally understand the mess she had made, or would she try to cover it up? Would Carly still think I was the bad guy, the villain who wasn't supporting his sister's dream day? And as I walked out of the venue, just before the final farewell to the newlyweds, I knew this was just the beginning. The next few days were going to be messy, painful, and, honestly, utterly chaotic. But I was ready for it, because no one was going to take what was mine ever again. The wedding had ended, and I was left standing in the middle of the mess. The shimmering lights of the reception hall had faded, the laughter and music from the night before still echoing in my ears. But the truth was, everything was far from over. It was only just beginning. As I sat in my car, I couldn't shake the feeling of what I'd just done. Freezing the funds, my inheritance, wasn't something I'd taken lightly. But when it came down to it, I had no choice. Mom had crossed the line, and Carly had enabled it. There was no turning back now. I wasn't going to stand by and watch them wipe out everything my father had left behind. For a wedding, for a show, my father's legacy didn't deserve to be a punchline in their game of social status. I didn't go back to the family home that night. In fact, I didn't go near it for a couple of days. Instead, I holed myself up in my apartment, trying to prepare for the fallout. I knew my mom would find out soon enough, and Carly, well, I had no doubt that she'd be on her side. After all, why would she care about the money? Carly had always gotten what she wanted, and I knew her well enough to predict her reaction: blame me. The day after the wedding, I didn't hear from anyone. No phone calls, no texts, nothing. I figured they were busy recovering from the whirlwind of the wedding day. But as the second day passed, the silence started to feel suffocating. That's when my mom finally called. I didn't answer at first. I needed to gather my thoughts. She left a voicemail. "Mark," she started, her voice filled with the kind of calm that only someone who's done something wrong can muster. "I need to talk to you. What the hell is going on with the accounts? Why did you freeze the funds? You know that money wasn't just for Carly's wedding. It was for her future. We were planning on using it to set her up for success." I hit the end button, shaking my head. It wasn't even an apology. Not once did she acknowledge what she'd done. Not once. But I knew it was coming. And sure enough, an hour later, my phone rang again. This time, I answered. "Mark," she said, her tone sharp. "We need to talk. Right now. What you've done is unforgivable. You have no idea how hard I've worked to give Carly the life she deserves." I had to stop myself from laughing. "You've worked hard? By spending my inheritance on her wedding?" I bit out, my voice tight. "I thought we talked about this. That money was for the both of us. It was for my future too." She paused. It was the kind of silence that told me she was searching for words, trying to figure out how to make me the bad guy in this situation. "Mark," she finally said, her voice quieter now but still laced with frustration. "You don't understand. Carly's been through so much, and she sighed deeply. "I did it for her. She's my daughter, Mark, and she needed that wedding. You'll never understand, will you?" I let out a bitter laugh, gripping the steering wheel harder. "I'll never understand? You're saying I'll never understand why you took my future, my inheritance, and blew it on a wedding for a girl who can't even keep a relationship together? Do you even hear yourself, Mom?" There was a long pause before she spoke again. "You're being unreasonable. If you don't unfreeze those accounts, I'll make sure you never see another cent of that money." That was the moment it clicked. She had no idea how serious I was. She thought she could bully me into backing down, like she always did. She always had that way of making me feel small, making me feel like I didn't matter. "Not anymore. I'm not backing down," I said flatly. "That money was meant for both of us, not for you to flaunt like some status symbol. You'll have to deal with it." I hung up before she could respond. But I knew this wasn't over. I knew she wouldn't let it go that easily. She would fight back. The next few days were nothing short of a war. Carly didn't call me directly, but I knew she had been in touch with Mom. Every time I saw her name pop up on my phone, I could feel my stomach churn. I didn't want to hear her voice, but it came to the point where I couldn't avoid it anymore. Carly sent me a message that night. "Mark, I'm really upset with you. You're making things difficult for all of us. Do you have any idea what this wedding meant to me? You're being completely unreasonable. Mom did this for me, for our family. You're acting like a child." I read her message, staring at the screen for a moment, trying to keep my emotions in check. This was it. The same old Carly, always wanting everything for herself, always thinking she was the victim. It was always about what she needed, what she wanted. And now, she was turning this whole thing around on me. I didn't want to engage with her, but I couldn't help it. I needed to make her understand. So, I responded. "Carly, you have no idea what's at stake here. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about my future, too. You don't even care about the consequences of this. You've never had to face them, but I will, and I'm done letting you get away with it." The message went unread for hours. But then, later that night, Carly finally replied, and her words stung worse than I expected. "You're so selfish. You've always been jealous of me. You've always thought you were entitled to more, and now you're going to ruin everything because of your ego." I felt my blood pressure rising. This was the game she always played, turning everything around and making me feel guilty for standing up for myself. I wasn't having it anymore. I responded, "I'm not ruining anything. I'm just taking what's mine. And if you want to keep playing these games, go ahead, but I'm not backing down. Not this time. And that's when the real trouble started. I'd underestimated how far they'd go to keep this facade going. Carly and Mom both started talking to lawyers. They had me served with a legal notice, accusing me of freezing the funds without cause. They claimed that I was disrupting the family's financial stability and demanded I unfreeze the accounts within 48 hours or face serious legal action. That's when the gloves really came off. I knew it was going to get messy, but I hadn't anticipated just how far they would go. I was in this alone, but I didn't care. They had gone too far, and I was determined to make them pay for it. The sound of the lawyer's letter dropping onto my kitchen table echoed through the silence of my apartment. I stared at it for a moment, the white envelope with the official stamp seeming almost surreal. I had been expecting this, of course, but seeing it in writing was something else. The war had officially begun. I wasn't naive. I knew they would fight me on this, but the audacity of their claim, the way they were twisting the situation to make me seem like the villain, it made my blood boil. And the timing? Perfect. Carly and Mom had both deliberately waited until I was isolated, until the whirlwind of the wedding had settled down and the dust had begun to settle in our little family drama. They didn't want to give me a chance to prepare for their legal retaliation. They wanted to catch me off guard, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't going to be intimidated. Not anymore, not after everything. I immediately called my lawyer, Samantha Graves, a nonsense, sharp ASATAC attorney who had handled my father's estate and had always been supportive when I needed her. She was my only ally in this, and if there was anyone who could help me navigate this mess, it was her. Mark, I've gone through the letter, Samantha said, getting straight to the point when she answered the phone. They are clearly trying to bully you into submission. You're not legally required to unfreeze anything unless there's evidence of fraud or mismanagement, which, based on the information you've shared with me, isn't the case. That was the first piece of good news I'd received in days. Still, I knew this battle was far from over. So what's next? I asked, feeling a little bit of the tension in my chest loosen. They are threatening to drag me through court, Sam. I'm not going to just fold. I wouldn't expect you to, she said with a chuckle. We'll respond with a letter, making it clear that you're not going to cave. But be prepared. This could get nasty. Carly and your mom won't back down easily. I nodded, taking in her words. I wasn't going to back down either. Not now. The next few days were a whirlwind. Every phone call felt like a ticking time bomb. I couldn't go a day without some new development, some new drama swirling around, thanks to Carly and Mom. They weren't letting up. First, Carly took to social media. Of course, she did. She was a master at crafting the perfect image, the one that painted her as the innocent victim in all of this. She posted a picture of herself on Instagram, sitting in a plush cafe with her friends, wearing a tight smile and a glittering ring on her finger. The caption read, "When you have the best wedding and your brother decides it's time to ruin it. #heartbroken #family over money #not about the wedding." It was a clear shot at me. Her whole social media presence was built around making people feel sorry for her. And now she was using it as ammunition against me. I could almost see her in her perfect little world, sitting there enjoying the drama she was creating, playing the victim. But she didn't know me as well as she thought. I wasn't going to let her manipulate the situation. So, I posted my own message, a subtle, but effective, response. When your family thinks it's okay to spend your inheritance on a wedding. Not your money to spend #legacy matters. It wasn't just a post, it was a statement. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. Not anymore. I was reclaiming my power, even if it was just a small step. Then, the phone calls started again. Mom, of course, was livid. She had finally lost her cool. I had never heard her this angry before. It was like the floodgates had opened, and now she was going full throttle, throwing every insult and threat she could think of my way. Mark, I don't know who you think you are, but I am done with you. You're destroying this family, and you don't even care about the damage you're doing. You've ruined everything, and for what? For a couple of $1,000s? You're acting like you didn't get your share of the inheritance. Do you think Carly doesn't deserve a piece of it? What do you think you're proving, huh? That you're better than her? That you're somehow entitled to more? Her voice was shaking with emotion, but underneath it all, I could tell she was furious. The real reason she was upset wasn't the money, it was the fact that she couldn't control me anymore. She had always controlled the family dynamic, always manipulated me into playing the part of the dutiful son, but now I was fighting back. I'm not going to fold, Mom. I'm doing what's right. You made a choice, and it's one I can't let slide. If you can't see that, then that's your problem, not mine, I said, my voice steady but firm. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I could tell she was struggling with the words, struggling to find a way to make me feel guilty. Fine. You want to play it this way? Then I'm done. I will never speak to you again. You're no son of mine. Her words stung, but they didn't have the power they used to. She was using her classic manipulation tactics, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I was done being her puppet. And then Carly made her move. She showed up at my apartment unannounced. Of course she did. She never liked to handle things through normal channels. Everything had to be dramatic and theatrical. I didn't even open the door at first. I knew it was her. The knock was too familiar. But eventually, I did. Mark, please listen to me. She didn't even bother with pleasantries. The second I opened the door, she barged right in, looking completely out of breath, her eyes red from what I assumed were fake tears. She was wearing a tight, expensive-looking dress that screamed, "I want attention," and I knew exactly what she was doing. "You've made a huge mistake," she continued, her voice pitched higher than normal, desperate. "You're throwing away everything, and for what? To be right? To prove something to Mom? You're destroying this family for your ego." I didn't even blink. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was trying to make me feel guilty, trying to get me to unfreeze the funds. But she didn't realize one thing: I was done. "Carly, I'm not the one who's destroying this family. You and Mom made that choice when you decided that a wedding was more important than my father's legacy. You could have asked me, you could have worked with me, but you didn't, and now you'll deal with the consequences." Her face twisted with anger, and for a moment, I thought she was going to shout. Instead, she stood there, seething with barely contained rage. "You'll regret this," she hissed, before storming out, slamming the door behind her with a loud bang. But in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. I wasn't going to be manipulated into giving up my inheritance just to keep the peace. It was the middle of the week when the storm finally hit, harder than I had imagined, but not unexpected. I had been waiting for this moment since I made the decision to freeze the funds. I knew Carly and Mom would do everything in their power to make me pay, to guilt-trip me into backing down. But I had done what I had to do. The inheritance was mine to protect, and I was no longer the quiet, obedient son who would take whatever they decided to throw at me. It started with a phone call, one that shook me to my core. Carly had gone off the deep end. I was sitting at my desk, working late into the night, when my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a text from a blocked number. I hesitated before opening it, my heart racing. The last thing I needed was more drama, but I opened it anyway. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Freezing the account, cutting me out of everything. You think I won't go public? You'll regret this." The message wasn't just a threat. It was a warning. I knew Carly well enough to know that when she said, "go public," she wasn't talking about some vague notion of ruining my reputation. She was talking about exposing our family secrets. She had the ammunition, and she wasn't afraid to use it. The things she knew about me, about the way our family had always operated, could ruin me if she really tried. But she didn't understand that I was no longer scared of her. I didn't fear her like I used to. She couldn't control me anymore. I took a deep breath, staring at the message for a long time before deciding my next move. She wouldn't get away with this. I immediately called Samantha, my lawyer. The conversation that followed was brief but reassuring. "Mark, this is exactly what we've been preparing for. Carly's threats are empty unless she can prove actual malice. If she does decide to take you to court, we'll counter with evidence of how she misused the inheritance. It's a game of chess now, and you're in the driver's seat." Samantha's words gave me a glimmer of hope. I wasn't alone in this. I wasn't about to let Carly use my family's dirty laundry as leverage. This would be the final stand. 2 days later, I received a formal letter from Mom's lawyer. This was it. I had been waiting for this final strike, and now it had come. The letter demanded that I immediately unfreeze the accounts and return the misappropriated funds, or face legal action. It went on to threaten public litigation and personal attacks in the media if I didn't comply. I felt a dark satisfaction wash over me as I read it. They thought I was bluffing, but what they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment for weeks. Samantha and I had already drafted a response, one that would shut them down cold. I wasn't going to let them bully me into submission. Not now. Not ever. I called Samantha and told her to send our response. The letter went out that same day. I wasn't sure if Mom and Carly would have the guts to follow through with their threats, but I knew one thing for sure: they would feel the heat. The phone calls from Carly became more frequent. She called, texted, and even left voice messages, each one more frantic and pleading than the last. "Mark, please, just hear me out. This isn't what Dad would have wanted. We're family," she cried on the other end of the line. You're ruining everything. This isn't about the money, it's about family. Why can't you see that? But I didn't care about her crocodile tears anymore. I didn't care about her family narrative. She had ruined everything when she and Mom decided to spend what wasn't theirs. I was done being the scapegoat in this twisted family dynamic. I wasn't playing that game anymore. I let her voicemail ping on my phone without listening to a single word. A week passed, and the tension between us grew unbearable. I hadn't heard from Mom at all, and I was beginning to wonder if she was staying silent because she had finally realized the weight of what she had done. Maybe she was trying to figure out how to get out of the hole she dug for herself. But then, as I sat down for a late dinner, my phone rang again. This time, it was Mom. I answered it, half expecting her to start screaming at me, but what I heard instead was different. Her voice, usually so commanding, was soft, fragile. Mark, I don't know what I was thinking. I'm sorry. Please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to get this far. I made a mistake, and now I don't know how to fix it. Can we please talk? Can we just fix this? I've been talking to Carly, and we both realize we went too far. Please, son, don't ruin your life over this. It's just money. Family is what matters. Don't let it break us apart. Asterisk asterisk. I paused, unsure of what to say. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that my mom was genuinely remorseful. But another part of me, the part that had been manipulated for so many years, wasn't ready to fall for her act again. I'm not doing this for money, Mom. I finally said, my voice steady but firm. I'm doing this because you both made a choice. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend it didn't happen. You spent what wasn't yours to spend. You don't just get to sweep it under the rug and act like everything is fine. This isn't about fixing things with a few words. It's about making things right, and if that means we never speak again, then so be it. But I'm not going to forgive you just because you want to forget what you did. Asterisk asterisk. The line went silent. I could hear her breathing, and for a moment, I thought she was going to hang up. But she didn't. I understand, Mark. She whispered, almost breaking down. I understand now. The weeks that followed were a blur. Carly kept up her social media campaign, still trying to paint herself as the victim. She posted memes and snicky comments that were clearly directed at me, but I stayed silent. I knew the truth, and that was enough. Then, the bombshell hit. Carly made good on her threats. She took me to court. I wasn't shocked. I'd been expecting this. But the court battle that ensued was everything I had feared, and then some. The lawyers dragged out every detail of our family's dysfunction, and the entire process felt like a public execution. Every private moment was put under a microscope, every past wrong magnified. But in the end, I won. I had the law on my side. I had the evidence, and in a victory that felt both sweet and hollow, the judge ruled in my favor, ordering Carly and Mom to pay the legal fees for both parties. The funds stayed frozen, and I didn't have to give them a dime. But as I stood there, holding the judgment in my hand, something inside me felt empty. The price of winning had been steep. I had lost my family, not just the inheritance, but something more valuable. The bond that had once existed between us was broken, and no matter how much I had fought for what was mine, I couldn't change the fact that the family I once knew was gone. As I left the courthouse, I felt a strange mix of relief and regret. I had done what I had to do, but at what cost? Would I ever be able to rebuild what was lost? Could a relationship built on so many lies and betrayals ever be salvaged? I wasn't sure, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what was to come. I had finally taken control of my own future, and for better or for worse, that was enough.